right, guys, welcome to the first lecture. This is the Dar al-Islam lecture that we're going to be talking about today. So this is the first part of this lecture. You can go back and review these notes anytime that you need to. So we're going to get started on what we're talking about with Dar al-Islam, or the House of Islam. So let's take a look. All right. Just before we get started, what I want you guys to do is two things. In your assignments folder, you should see something on there that is Dar al-Islam, and they've got the Seljuk Sultanate. There's got a map of Islam, the Mamluk Sultanate, the Delhi Sultanate. I want you to go ahead and delete that one. Those were the old notes. We're going to kind of expand this a little bit more. So what you're going to do instead is you're going to click this blue link and make a copy of this document, 1.2 Developments in Dar al-Islam. You're going to make a copy of this, and then your notes are going to be in here. So this is where your notes are going to go in this document. So just make sure that you have that in that folder. That's where that's going to be. All right, so just so you guys are aware, we're going to be filling out these notes based on the following information. So from this lecture, you're going to be filling out these notes from the reading on the AMSCO book that you read about Dar al-Islam. And then you guys took notes on a Heimler history video as well. So all those spaces could get notes to help you answer these questions, but primarily I want you to get them. They should be from this lecture, kind of going in different order. So let's take a look at what we have for topic 1.2. All right, so the questions that we're going to be answering are three big kind of objectives that we're trying to answer. The first one is we're trying to look at how religion impacts society, because that's very much, when we're talking about Islam, we're talking about a connection between religion and government. We're also talking about an empire, but we're also talking about this empire that is the spreading of the religion. So that's the one. The second thing, we're going to look at the cause and effect of the actual Islamic government itself over time. And then lastly, this is a really, really important one, is to look at the movement of ideas and new technologies and innovations and that are going all around the world that are being influenced by this religion. So that's where we're going to start. So just to kind of review what's going on in the world before 1200, right up until this point. So you've got in China, you've got the Han Dynasty. In Italy, you had the Roman Empire. And in Greece, you had the Athenians and the Spartans. So that world had pretty much collapsed by around 500 CE. So for the last 700 years, much of the western part of the world, where Europe is in a period of chaos. This is known as the Dark Ages. And so we begin to see, because there's so much chaos over there, we begin to see a major shift of power from where it used to be in Southern Europe and Rome. That's where power used to be, Roman Empire, moving towards Southern Asia, kind of like the Indian Ocean. And what's really shifting this move of power is trade. So the Indian Ocean, the Silk Road, the trans-Saharan trade routes, all these begin to dominate the world. And what's really important about those three trade routes is that they're located in the eastern half of the world. So trade begins to define power. So where power is where trade is. And that's a very, very important thing to note. The collapse of the Roman Empire didn't just happen overnight. It was actually 476 CE is what most scholars say, but it actually lasted hundreds of years past the collapse of the Roman Empire, because the Eastern Roman Empire, which we're going to refer to as the Byzantine Empire, right here, the Byzantine Empire, they're going to carry on the legacy through its capital city in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, Turkey. Constantinople is a really, really important center of the world, because it's the major city. It's a huge city. It's like it's a Beijing. It's a New York City. It's a Rome. It's a huge city, but it also is so geographically important because it links the East with Asia and the Middle East and China to the West, which is Europe. Another thing about that it's important is that it's Christian, but it's not Catholic. The Byzantines worship something called Orthodoxy or Orthodox Christianity, which is a little bit different than Roman Catholicism. So there's a split. And so those two are not always supporting each other in wars and trade. There's a little kind of animosity or frustration between the Pope in Rome and who is the religious leaders in the Byzantine Empire. China and Islam are the centers of wisdom throughout the world. So when we're looking at new technologies and science and mathematics and astrology and medicine, pretty much the centers of the world are in the East, in China, and Baghdad is going to be the major city in the Abbasid Empire. The Abbasids are the rulers of the Islamic world. It's called the Abbasid because they are the actual name of the empire that runs it. And this is kind of known as the golden age of Islam. So at this time, you've also got in China, you've also got the Song dynasty, as you guys remember reading about them, and they're reigning supreme. So they have new inventions like the compass and movable type and gunpowder, and all these new inventions are happening in China. And then a little bit further south, we have Africa, and it's pretty much mostly tribal at this point. Lots of different tribes, lots of different people. But there are some parts of North Africa that are starting to be converted, are starting to be influenced by Islam because of those trade routes. And the rest of the world is kind of developing on their own in the Americas and Oceania. All are kind of isolated from the rest of the world. So that's kind of a little bit overview of what's going on at this time. So let's take a look at a map of this world. So this is an overview of Unit 1. You'll notice the different colors correspond down here with the different units. So we've talked a little bit about 1.1, which was the Chinese dynasties, the Song and the Ming, and then Southeast Asia, or kind of what's happening with Japan and Korea and stuff like that. Now we're going to move to 1.2. And if you'll notice, just looking straight away right at the map, you'll notice that their influence is huge. I mean, it's almost most of Northern Africa, Spain, the Middle East, parts of India, Central Asia, huge part of the Swahili coast down in Africa. All this area is being influenced by Islam. So the good question to look at is the influence is way bigger for Dar al Islam. But a good question to think about is whose influence is greater? Is it Islam's or is it China? And that's a debatable one because we're going to see a lot of long-term effects of both of these major centers of the world. All right. So let's take a look at some context about Islam as a religion. Islam spreads outward after Muhammad's death through what we call the three M's. So starting out here in the Arabian Peninsula, right there, with the cities of Mecca and Medina, it expands through the three M's. So the first one is a military conquest. So Islam itself is a religion, but it's also a government, and governments are known for having militaries. So Islam would very seldomly and almost never say to people, listen, convert to this religion or we will kill you. It's more of a perceived power as they become the dominant centers in the Middle East, and a lot of these places that travel to didn't necessarily have dominant powers before. Because they are replacing them, a lot of people willingly convert to the religion. The second are, and this is a big one, are the merchants, because the merchants are going to trade mostly by camel, and what we call our caravans. So caravans are groups of traders traveling together, usually as a larger group. And eventually, what's going to happen is that's kind of what's going on there. The last way they spread was through missionaries. So we obviously have the idea of spreading and carrying trade, but also times these missionaries and these traders would carry the ideas along with them, as well as different innovations and ideas of medicine and science and mathematics as they move across the rest of the world. After the death of Muhammad, Islam begins to move out of the Arabian Peninsula and throughout the world. As you can see from this map on the right, you've got places that it's going to spread to all the way from Spain up here in the top left, all the way to Delhi in India. So this huge area of spread kind of covers much of the world as it kind of goes. So 14 hours by plane even today. All right, so let's look at the major ones right here, which is the Abbasid Caliphate. The Abbasid Caliphate, this is kind of known as the golden age of Islam from about 700 to about 1200 CE. They created a huge trade network. It was ginormous. It basically ran throughout the entire Middle East, most of Northern Africa, leads to the rise of new cities, new trade cities, exchanging of goods and ideas, and it spreads the religion even further and further west. As you can kind of see the extent of the Abbasid Caliphate right here in this picture, this map right here, just how huge of an area it is. It's also known to travel throughout Southeast Asia. The country Malaysia today is a majority 63% Islamic country. And so the reason that is, it begins to spread so quickly is with this rise of trade. And the rise of trade, Islam is introduced to the world at large, and the idea of credit and business contracts, it begins to transform not only religion and the culture of these places, but also how trade is being conducted, how business is being conducted. and those who are willing to engage. And so, even if you weren't necessarily looking for a new religion, you're looking to trade. You're looking to kind of exchange goods. And so, in effect, the religion spreads along with that. So, here's a really good video to open up and watch about the rise of the golden age of Islam and kind of some misconceptions that we have about it and how that's different from today. All right, so what brought down the Abbasid Caliphate, this glorious empire that spread technology and medicine and trade? What brought this down? Well, what brought down it? You can guess. It's the Mongols. We're going to see the Mongols a lot throughout the rest of this year. As the Mongols went from civilization to civilization, destroying it and conquering, they often left people a choice. So, right before the invasion, they give you a choice. Say, listen, you can surrender to us and submit and view us as your rulers and your leaders, or you can refuse. But if you refuse, we will have a complete destruction of everything in your empire. So that's the typical answer of what brought down the Abbasid Caliphate. But something we're going to look at today and kind of hear a little bit of a story about something else that might have brought down the Abbasid Caliphate. So if you remember, Islam, one of the big issues with the religion was this succession crisis. Who is going to be the ultimate caliph? Or how do we decide who's going to be the successor to Muhammad? And so this goes back pretty much all to ancient Islam itself. And so remember this split between Sunni and Shia all kind of falls back down to this. So this is what was a little bit being said about the Abbasid Caliphate, the caliph himself right there. One ruler described him as devoted to entertainment and pleasure, passionately addicted to playing with birds, and dominated by women. He is a man of poor judgment, irresolute and neglectful of what is needed for the conduct of government. So you can tell, not a huge fan, and these are his own writers that are describing him like this. Another chronicler summed up the caliph this way: undoubtedly, he was not fit for kingship, and greatness was beyond him. And so you can tell right here that this guy was not the one to be in charge of your empire, right as the Mongols were knocking on your door. So the caliph's court, and the court is kind of like your closest advisors, and you kind of have like 10 to 15 people on your court. The caliph's court was not much better than himself, because the court itself was portrayed as being a bunch of schemers and backstabbers who spent most of their time fighting amongst each other, that they really never really worked for the benefit of the realm, for the benefit of the empire. So included a position called a vizier, and a vizier is kind of like a special advisor. And the vizier, who unlike the rest of the court, who was completely Sunni, the vizier and the caliph himself, the vizier himself was a Shia. And that's going to be very important in this as this story progresses. And he was despised by the rest of the court, and they hated him because he was a different sect of the religion. So there was also a commander known as Dawatadar, who was looking to take power for himself. So he's got this military commander who's in charge of the defenses against the Mongols, and he's got this advisor who's a Shia. So in the summer of 1256, with the Mongols kind of campaigning in neighboring Iran, Baghdad was hit by huge floods, and the river Tigris actually began to overflow. Before the waters went back into the river, anarchy and violence broke out, and each side blamed the other. So the Shias blamed the Sunnis blamed the Shias. You have this violence and frustration. So one of the sons of the caliph led a group of soldiers to the neighborhood of Kark, where they slaughtered a lot of the Shias living there. So even though there was this violence between the Sunnis and the Shias, and both were pretty much doing the same thing, it was kind of blamed as the Shias because they were not the one in power. So they were being targeted by the ruler. The vizier, who himself was a Shia, protected hundreds of fellow Shias, letting them to take refuge in his own palace. And then this event, even though he was trying to just keep people alive, often alleged is that other people believed that this is what led to a lot of people to believe that the vizier himself was secretly supporting the Mongols. So, the grandson of Genghis Khan, Hulagu, he eventually comes with 200,000 men with orders to conquer everything all the way from the Middle East up until the Nile River in Egypt. According to one writer, one of his brothers, Monkey, told Hulagu, if the Caliph of Baghdad comes out to pay homage, or if he comes out to say that we will support you, harass him in no way whatsoever. So if they give up, then he's going to be left alone. But if he is prideful and his heart and tongue are not one, let him join the others, which means he will destroy them. So, kind of giving him the Mongol traditional kind of order right there. So, before launching his campaign, the Mongol commander sent a bunch of messengers and letters urging the Abbasid ruler to submit to the Mongols. They came with the typical Mongol threats. The Mongols said this: when I lead my troops against Baghdad, even if you hide in the sky or in the earth, I shall not leave one person alive in your realm, and I shall put your city and country to the torch. The Caliph, knowing this, had his rhetoric pretty much ready in response. He said, you can come with strategy, you can come with troops and a lasso, but how are you going to capture a star? Does the prince not know that from the east to west, from king to beggar, from old to young, all who are God fearing and God worshipping are servants of this court and soldiers in my army? So you can kind of see right here that this Abbasid emperor was not going to bow down to the Mongols. So the vizier was able to talk to um, his emperor, and he tries to get him to listen. We got to negotiate a peace with these Mongols. But the military ruler from earlier, Dawatar, and the other members of the court demanded that we will not at all submit to the Mongols. And the Caliph started listening to the fellow Sunnis and realized that we need to prepare our army. An army of Kurdish forces was hired to defend Baghdad, but after a few months, the Caliph decided that he was going to stop paying them, and they left. So now he's left without an army. They tried to get volunteers from Syria and Egypt to fight under the Islamic flag, but it was too late. This guy was so ineffective as a ruler that no one was coming to his defense. So as the Mongols attacked and burned the city, some say the death toll was as high as 200,000 people. Others say it could have been as high as 800,000 people. And they completely destroyed the city. They destroyed the libraries. They destroyed the hospitals. They destroyed the entire sewer system so effectively that when the United States invaded Iraq in 2006 and they went to Baghdad, they still had damage left over from 1258. And they never were able to fully get the sewer system back to functioning as well as it was in 1258. So the question then asks, what happens to this ruler? What happens to this caliph? Well, in the version given by Marco Polo, Hulagu, which is the grandson of Genghis Khan, has him locked into a tower and filled with all his gold, his pearls, and his riches. The Mongol ruler told him, now listen, caliph, you can eat your fill of treasure, since you're so fond of it, for you will get nothing else. After that, the Mongol ruler left the tower and locked him in there. 4 days later, the ruler of the giant Abbasid Caliphate succumbed to hunger and thirst. On the day of his death, the Mongol leader freed the vizier and made him the governor of the city. He was then sent back to the burned out Baghdad, where he and other officials set about rebuilding this once glorious city. He then asked all the remaining religious scholars, who were pretty upset by now, would you rather be ruled by an infidel, a Mongol, or an unjust believer, a Shia? They chose the latter, and the end of the Sunni-led Abbasid dynasty was complete. So that is possibly another version of what brought down the Abbasid Caliphate. All right, so let's take a look now at these different groups that came in and ruled different parts of the once great empire, because there were many invaders even before the Mongols tried and successfully destroyed the empire in 1258. The first group was the Mamluks. Mamluks were former soldiers, slaves actually. They were slaves from modern day Turkey, and they were a nomadic people. So they were very proficient on the horses, kind of similar to the Mongols. But they were employed. So they were hired by the Egyptian to serve in their armies and their government, because Egypt was corrupt. There was so much corruption in the government that they realized, hey, listen, let's get outsiders hire them, and then they'll take over and they can be in our positions of prominence. And so we won't have to worry about these other Egyptians kind of being too corrupt. The Romans actually did the same thing with the Visigoths, and the Visigoths eventually were the ones to take down the Roman Empire. But it wasn't until they had these positions of power. So, just like the Romans, the Egyptians did not learn from their history. The Mamluks started to soon realize, hey, listen, we have everything that we need to rule. We're already in high positions in the government, and we're definitely the better soldiers. So they said, all right, this is going to be easy. So they decided to establish their own kingdom, their own sultanate. And after they took over, they ruled for nearly 300 years. However, the Mamluks were way more interested in trade and gold than they were in spreading the religion. Eventually, the Portuguese and other Europeans are going to develop new sea routes for trades, and the Mamluks are going to be kind of replaced as the ruling group. The second group is the Seljuk Turks. The Seljuk Turks were another group of nomads from the area of where is now modern day Iran or ancient Persia. There was a leader named Seljuk, believe it or not, and he viewed himself as the leader of the Sunni religion and proclaimed himself the protector of the realm. He fought many religious wars against the Sunnis, the Christians, and other nomads. He eventually is going to expand the Seljuk Empire all the way from western China, all the way from Persia to western China. But eventually, he's going to establish his own government in India, which is going to be called the Delhi Sultanate, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And next up we've got the Crusaders, who have the famous phrase "Deus vult." Deus vult, you might have heard before, called God wills it. So, as Christianity, specifically Catholicism, took its hold over Europe, it had a desire to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. And it wanted to give itself a break from killing each other, fellow Europeans, to what they called non believers. So they took advantage of the tolerance of the golden age of Islam, because the golden age was known for being very tolerant and letting missionaries from different religions come in, Jews and Christians, and come to the holy sites in Jerusalem. And they took advantage and they set up all these different holy sites. So all these different pilgrimages would come, and it was a very popular destination for rulers to come to Jerusalem. Eventually, when the Seljuks took power, they said, no, we're not going to have any Christians. There's going to be no Christians that can come and visit the holy sites. Eventually, the Pope is not going to get very happy about this. And what he's going to do is he's going to call for a series of crusades or holy wars to reclaim what he saw as Christian holy territory. This had a lot of mixed success. A lot of times they'd have large armies. These armies would be full of peasants and they'd be huge numbers, but they were unprepared to travel. They weren't prepared to fight in the desert. And so many people died of starvation and dehydration. They also had a lot of times where they would reclaim Jerusalem, or they'd reclaim somewhere like Antioch or one of these Christian cities. And then eventually they'd lose it to one of the Islamic armies, and then go back and forth and back and forth. So overall, it kind of was met with a mixed success that was way more temporary than permanent. There was not a lot of permanent success that happened right here. The good lesson from the Crusades here, and this is a lesson that we're going to see throughout history time and time again, is that expansion through war is oftentimes very less effective than expansion through trade. Although there is one exception to this: the Mongols. So that's where we're going to finish our lecture for today. And what I want you guys to do is kind of think about all the stuff we talked about, put your notes down from what was in there, and then kind of anytime you need to go back and recap anything, that's where you can add. So that's going to be lecture one. Tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit more about the Delhi Sultanate, the culture and social aspects of Islam, and then kind of the spread of Islam into Spain. All right. So make sure you get your notes done, and that is going to wrap us up for lecture number one.